question. She says, what is the name of your mum's auntie's best friend's dad's brother's dog?
That's good.
How many marks out of 10 for Richard?
That's quite good. That's 9.
9. Ooh, well done.
I'd say Roger.
Roger.
Roger the dog.
Roger. Oh, you're obviously a close-knit community. Well, if you can think of an original question that answer has probably never been asked before, then you can phone it to us or you can practice the numbers on your screens now. You're going to hang around and answer these questions and pick a winner, but all of that is happening after today's BluePeter.
We're off on another adventure on today's BluePeter in search of a year from the past on the trail of a whole programme of time travel.
And we're in the right place at the BBC Time Travel Studio.
We've already been to 1805 and 1922. Where are we going to go next?
Guys, we're about to find out. Remember, Scotland the Brave!
Why, Harry, very good. Will I ever see Wrexham again? Bye! Woo! Woo! Coming up on this time-travelling BluePeter, the story of the most famous fighting plane ever built. It made its first flight in this special year.
And it was the year of the superstar athlete Jesse Owens, who won 4 gold medals at the Olympic Games. But which one?
Also, the man who wrote The Jungle Book, Kim and the Just So stories died in this year. I've been to explore his house. And it was the year of musical star George Formby, who sang about cleaning windows. Hello! Yeah, have you guessed it yet? BluePeter time machine seems to have traveled back exactly 60 years.
Well, it's 1936 and we're still travelling in MG, but this one is a rare MG-NB magnet, which you can normally see at the British Motor Heritage Trust near Warwick. Now, we're in 1936 because we asked viewers to choose a year for us to explore, and from the hundreds of suggestions sent in, 1936 was chosen.
The idea came from 10-year-old Catherine Sears, who lives in Rickmansworth in Hertfordshire. She's with us here in the studio, and just like us, she's dressed in the period. So, give us a quick chill. Very smart indeed. Then take a seat, sit down. Why are you so interested in 1936, Catherine?
Well, we studied it in school, and I was particularly interested in 1936 because it was the Jarrow Crusade, but we never actually studied this in full detail.
Well, it's a fantastic time. That was a very important historic event when 200 unemployed workers marched 280 miles from the Durham town of Jarrow all the way to Downing Street, where the Prime Minister lives. They were protesting about the lack of jobs in the northeast. Well, sit back and enjoy the show. Over the next 25 minutes, we'll hopefully shed some light on the 1930s. To get us in the spirit of 1936, here's the Aylesbury Music Centre Dance Band performing a big hit from that year. Written by Irving Berlin, let's face the music and dance.
Main sports news of 1936.
Like 1996, 1936 was an Olympic Games year. The Games were held in Germany, ruled at that time by Adolf Hitler and the Nazi Party, which had been elected to power 3 years earlier. The Nazis believed that the Aryan race of the Northern European white people was supreme and better than other peoples.
And what better place to prove that than at the Olympic Games taking place in Berlin's mighty new stadium in front of 110,000 spectators. Its design had been personally supervised by Hitler himself, and this was to be the stage on which German athletes beat the world. From the start, the Berlin Olympics were more about politics than sport. At the opening ceremony, Hitler expected every country's team to give the raised arm Nazi salute, paying homage to him and the Nazi flag. The British team didn't salute, and the American team refused even to acknowledge him. Hitler and the German spectators thought they'd been insulted.
If the crowd didn't like that, they and Hitler hated what came next. Jesse Owens, a champion black American athlete, was already a world record holder in several events. Hitler believed that black people were virtually subhuman, but Owens turned out to be more like Superman. In 4 days at Berlin, he won 4 gold medals, the first athlete ever to do so. He also smashed world and Olympic records. The first was in the 100 meters.
I'm very glad to have won the 100 meters in the Olympic Games here in Berlin. A very beautiful place and a very beautiful setting. The competition was grand, and we're very glad to come out on top. Thank you very kindly.
Hitler congratulated the white athletes who won on the first day, but refused to meet the black champions. He left the stadium in a huff.
Although Hitler had tried to turn athletes against each other, Jesse Owens and the German long jumper Lutz Long became very good friends. Owens won a gold for long jump and set a new Olympic record. Long came second, just a few centimetres behind.
Owens also won gold in the sprint relay and the 200 meters. The crowd went wild when he broke the world and Olympic records. But once again, Hitler won his achievement.
Owens was only 22 when he became one of the most famous people in the world. His 4 golds, won in the Inferno of the Berlin Olympics, stands as perhaps the greatest Olympic triumph of all time.
Even RAF officers can take off their hat and relax. Now, not quite so earth-shattering as the Berlin Olympics was the start of BBC television in 1936. 2 of the first 3 announcers were women. Elizabeth Cowell and Jasmine Bligh were seen and heard on the world's first high-definition television service from the Alexandra Palace in London. There was plenty in the news, so here's another of those BBC lady announcers, Miss Katie Hill. She's coming up any minute now. We've just got to tune her in. I'll let you know.
Hello and welcome to this special 1936 edition of News Round. And first, the top story of 1936. The nation is shocked by the decision of His Majesty the King to give up his throne. The King's close friendship with the American Mrs. Wallis Simpson has been well known in high society circles, but news of it has only just been made apparent to the public. Mrs. Wallis Simpson has been married twice before, and it appears that the Prime Minister has advised the King that he cannot marry Mrs. Simpson. The King has made a broadcast to the people.
I have found it impossible to discharge my duties as King as I would wish to do, without the help and support of the woman I love.
So King Edward VIII is no more. He will become simply the Duke of Windsor. He and Mrs. Simpson are expected to marry shortly when they will have left Britain forever. achievement. The flamboyant high society lady, Miss Beryl Markham, has become the first woman to fly solo across the Atlantic Ocean. These dramatic pictures of her crashed plane have just reached us. Miss Markham flew 2,700 miles in her Percival Gull aeroplane, which carried no two-way radio or fuel gauge. She later arrived to a heroine's welcome in New York, sporting only a minor cut to her head. The newest and largest addition to Great Britain's superb fleet of ocean liners has set sail for America. The Queen Mary, named after the Queen Mother, is carrying 1,840 passengers on her maiden voyage from Southampton to New York. She'll undertake the voyage in just 4 days, travelling at a record speed of 31 knots. The liner is not only one of the fastest, but the most luxurious ships ever to have sailed. A fine tribute to the shipworkers of the Clyde who built her. And finally, sad news from Sussex. Mr. Rudyard Kipling, acclaimed author of classic children's stories such as The Jungle Book and Kim, has died. He was 70 years old and for the last few years of his life lived at his country house, Batemans. An ideal place for a Blue Peter presenter to explore in 1996.
This is Batemans, the country home that Rudyard Kipling and his family lived in for the last half of his life. When Rudyard Kipling and his wife bought this house in 1902, he was already a rich and famous writer. But despite his fame and wealth, he'd suffered quite a lot of unhappiness. He was searching for somewhere that he described as a good and peaceable place. Rudyard was born in India, a child of the ruling class, as India was part of the British Empire. His father was an artist and designer, and their life was very comfortable. Little Rudyard was looked after by Indian servants, and, very unusually, he learned their language, Hindustani. But at the age of 6, he was sent away from his family home to school in a cold, strange, and distant land, England. Rudyard was bullied and beaten by the people he'd been sent to live with. His only relief was when he went to stay with his aunt. He would pull on this bell at her house of enchantment, as he called it, and when he bought Batemans, he had the bell removed and installed here. He returned to India when he was 17 to work as a reporter, and then travelled all over the world. Many of the things in Kipling's home were collected on those travels. There were Tiffany lamps and mirrors from America, paintings from China, Buddhas from Tibet, and elephants from India. Miss De La Coin from Sweden also came from his travels. It's so old and delicate, I've put gloves on to handle it. Kipling liked his little jokes. This Indian brass fish was once a toy with wheels on it, but Kipling's children broke it. If a visitor found it facing in, then they knew they were welcome, but if it was facing out, then it was time to leave. Kipling had already written The Jungle Book by the time he arrived at Batemans, and Mowgli and the other characters are everywhere. Kipling's father made these plaques of bronze, plaster and terracotta from the illustrations in The Jungle Book, and the prints are here too. Kipling mainly wrote stories. He had a huge library of books, but most of them were only used for reference. Travel books, books on the Navy, beekeeping, farming, angling, and the Bible, all well loved and well thumbed. This is Kipling's special place where he did all his writing by hand on special notepads. There was a typewriter, but he hardly ever used it, complaining that it, the beastly thing, just couldn't spell. He also refused to have a telephone in the house because he didn't want to speak to someone he couldn't see. Sometimes Kipling had problems thinking clearly about his stories, so he would lie on this sofa and wait for inspiration. If he was alive today, I would never have been allowed in here. He was friendly and he liked entertaining, but not in here. This was his special room. All the visitors that came to Kipling's house were recorded in this book. If they had FIP next to the name, like Mother, who came here on August the 4th, it meant they'd fallen in the pond. The dining room is one of the most beautifully decorated in the house. These walls are covered in leather, stamped, varnished, and then painted with the Chinese tree of life. Even in a formal room like this, children were encouraged with a secret cupboard for their toys. Perhaps they played with them on the floor whilst their adults sat at the table chatting.
He was awarded the Nobel Prize for Literature in 1907, the first English writer to receive it, and was offered many other honours, most of which he refused. The money he received from the prize was used to design the garden and park.
He might not have liked telephones and typewriters, but there were certain forms of modern life that Kipling loved. He was one of the first people to own a car and generate electricity from the mill house, running it through cables back to the house.
Bateman's has stayed very much the same since Kipling died 60 years ago, thanks to the National Trust. It's open to the public from April to October, and Blue Peter badge winners can get in free. It's well worth a visit to the home of one of Britain's most famous writers.
He had a great sense of humour as well, that FIP, falling in the pond, I like that. Now, 1936 saw the maiden flight of a world-famous British fighter aircraft. It was to become a legend in the Second World War. The Spitfire, with its Rolls-Royce engine and that glorious sound. Over 22,000 of these aircraft were built, but today only a few remain. Only 46 Spitfires are still flying. These two are here at Duxford, part of the Imperial War Museum. The Spitfire was designed by R.J. Mitchell, who was a brilliant designer of aeroplanes. After his training, he went to work for the Supermarine Company, where he became chief designer, chief engineer, and director of the company, all at the young age of 24.
He designed flying boats and seaplanes, including the Supermarine racing seaplane, the S6B, which became famous, winning international air races in Britain. It was from this and other successes that the first Spitfire Mark I was created.
On March the 5th, 1936, Spitfire K5054 took off on its first test flight. Its performance staggered everyone who saw it. Unfortunately, K5054 no longer exists, but others, like this one, have survived. I don't know about you, but I think it's a beautiful aircraft.
Nobody knew then what a vital part it was to play in the future of Britain. Transformed into a warplane, the Spitfire went on to meet the threat of the German Air Force in the Battle of Britain.
Between July the 10th and October the 31st, 1940, an average force of 957 Spitfires and 1,326 Hurricanes fought off the might of the German Air Force. They were outnumbered by 5 to 1. Frightening odds.
Wilco! Scrap bell! Britain's Prime Minister Winston Churchill praised the gallantry of the fighter pilots with these famous words.
Never in the field of human conflict was so much owed by so many to so few.
The Spitfire that I flew.
Wing Commander Terry Kay is one of the few. He flew a Spitfire, fought in the Battle of Britain, and helped to win it.
It was a really beautiful aircraft, a perfect lady. Everything that's ever been said about it is true. It really is a most marvelous aeroplane. Flying in combat, you've got to have an aeroplane that does it for you, and this one did it par excellence, so that whatever you did with it, it would react and it wouldn't fall to pieces. You may have an aircraft at your tail, or you may want to get on the tail of another aircraft, and because of that you have to perform really very violent maneuvers, and in doing that this aircraft is absolutely wonderful.
It's a rare privilege to fly in a Spitfire these days, but a Blue Peter presenter has done it. Not me, unfortunately, but John Leslie, who flew in this very aircraft 2 years ago. This is what he thought of it.
It's so majestic up here. You can see the coastlines down there at the south of Britain. And it must have been a great sight for the pilots coming back after boys and France and Germany. Wow, beautiful. Little G-force there. pressure bearing down as we turn to the left here. You can see every bolt and every dial and every screw. There's nothing added which should really be here. It's really down to the basics. Right, the Toronto's got a heater really. Oh no! Oh no! I probably lost my bearings there. I don't know where I was.
Wow, exciting stuff. Well, you can see the largest gathering of flying Spitfires since the end of the Second World War on Bank Holiday Monday, May the 6th, 1996. And they'll be at the Imperial War Museum, Duxford, in Cambridgeshire. And BluePeter badge winners getting free. But now, a 1936 challenge for Tim and Stuart, who in the interest of history have stripped down to their underwear.
Oh, yeah.
Yes, oh yes.
It's not cold at all.
This is underwear. It's what gentlemen wore in 1936.
Love showers.
It is, dear. Lovely enough. Well, your challenge is to transform yourself into two dashing Innies, if that's possible. If it's possible. 1936 style, of course. Now, Savile Rose was flamboyant and couture tailor, excuse me. Oswald Boteg is the judge. Hello, welcome to BluePeter. Now, the best dressed person will be buying dinner tonight, guys. Okay, warning you. So, ready, steady, go! Okay, go for it. Get the top on. So, the gentlemen always dressed like this.
Well, I think, not really, but, I mean, in those days, yes, definitely, but, Calvin Klein's done it, he's done it sensationally, very much.
Wow, I bet. And what about the collars? I see that they're very hard. They're like, you obviously use starch. You know, does that still go on now?
Well, no, not really, not as much as that, no, but, I think what they do now is they put a bone in the collar, so they don't use starch now.
What trousers are these? Are you trousers, Tim, are you?
What, there you go.
It's a bit short, I think.
What's wrong with your trousers? Oh my God.
One excuse, any excuse. I don't know. I know.
Why is he lying?
I don't know.
Any excuse. I've heard them all
Get your
before.
ties on, guys.
Come on now, come on, get rid
Come
of
on,
it.
get into this. Oh, there's a bit dark.
Oh, lovely, lovely.
No,
Look,
no.
lovely. Word of luck, word of luck.
Okay, we've got half a minute left, guys. So you know, you take your time. Don't hurry on my time.
Oh, got a waistcoat on,
Also,
is it doing well?
these detachable collars as well.
Oh, man, marvellous.
Well, that was very confident. Really confident, then they didn't have to change the whole shirt.
15. Oh, we're getting
Here
there.
we go, getting
10
close.
seconds left, folks. 9, 7,
Lovely.
6,
Oh,
5, 4, 3, 2, 1.
oh.
Oh my,
Wow,
let's go to
that's
the
it.
medal. Well,
Let's have a
it's
look
up
at
to you. Here's Stuart, I think.
Stuart, well,
Now look,
Stuart.
one
Oh, lovely.
more. Now, I didn't get the other
Right,
one.
you've done well there.
Yeah.
Stuart, come on.
Trousers are on and I've got my feet through the boat.
Oh, it's got, right, so it's got his socks on there.
What
Yeah,
happened
tie.
here, Stuart?
Well, I
Oh,
didn't quite
lovely.
get to the first time, unfortunately, but then I'm not quite
Well, I'm glad to see the collar on there. That's good. Oh, there,
You
that's
don't want to
lovely.
look under this jacket, though. It's a real
Right,
disaster.
and waistcoats on? Brilliant.
I think I just got off my dinner actually with this. What about you? What about
It's
you?
really the
Tim?
resistance, this one, isn't it?
Yeah,
He's got the bow tie on there.
Can I just say one thing? Sorry, Oswald.
Yeah.
There's been cheating afoot here. Look, someone is towed up the trousers then.
No,
Let's declare the winner, folks. Who's the winner, Oswald?
I
Up to
think,
you.
I think he's making excuses there.
Yeah, I think you're
I'm
right.
still going to give it to you,
Winner,
then.
Stuart.
Yes!
You're the
Individual.
winner. You're the winner, folks.
Conceptual, conceptual.
I don't normally dress like this. We've nearly come to the end of our 1936 time tunnel travel. On Wednesday, we'll be back in 1996, trying to solve the mysterious case of the disappearing budgie.
And my behind-the-scenes look at the day of BluePeter.
We couldn't leave 1936 though without hearing the music of one of the most popular British entertainers, a musical star from Lancashire with a ukulele and a cheeky grin. Yes, it's George Formby. Yes, his song When I'm Cleaning Windows was a big hit in 1936, as it's going to be right now, performed by members of the George Formby Society.